My name is Ed Gabriel. I'm the president of the American Task Force on Lebanon and former U.S. ambassador. Welcome to this MEI, Middle East Institute, and ATFL webinar interview of two very special guests. The U.S. facilitator for the Maritime Border Agreement, Amos Hochstein, who is Special Presidential Coordinator, and his Lebanese counterpart, Elias, Lebanon's Deputy Parliament Speaker. To kick off our discussion, we have a very, very special guest, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, and importantly, chairman of the House U.S. Lebanon Friendship Caucus. Darren, it's an honor to have you with us today, and we thank you for your continued commitment to a strong U.S.-Lebanon relationship.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Gabriel. And let me just acknowledge MEI and ATFL for putting on this presentation today. It's very important we do this, and for the continued work that ATFL does as it relates to the bilateral relationship between Lebanon and the United States. Very important. I'm proud to be one of the co-chairs of the U.S. Lebanon Friendship Caucus in the United States Congress. And we were happy as a part of this historic agreement between Lebanon and Israel to send a letter with my colleagues, Representative Elias and Debbie Dingell, in support of this historic agreement. And Ed, I would just make 3 points before you get to your guests. First, let me just say this is historic in terms of the gravity of this agreement. After decades of disputed land borders and demarcations, to reach this agreement is significant. And what it shows the international community is that Lebanon can function as an international country on this stage. It shows that they can achieve results that are for the betterment of Lebanon in an international agreement, and they should be properly commended for that. This is a positive step for Lebanon, and getting all factions and all parties to agree to this says an awful lot. And it goes without saying that we need to commend Special Envoy Amos Hochstein and Deputy Speaker Elias for their work and dedication and commitment on this. The second point that I will make is this is a real opportunity for Lebanon as it relates to the energy exploitation that can take place in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. The energy opportunities there are significant. And when you look at the electricity crisis that Lebanon is currently going through and the problems they have,
are you able to hear me?
Help to fill the deficiencies that are there. And I would just add, I think as this agreement gets codified and Lebanon moves forward with that potential energy production, I think it's important that we make sure that the benefits go to the Lebanese people and the citizens of Lebanon, and there's proper transparency and oversight, and it's done in a responsible and legal way. I think the world will be watching, and we will be watching in the Congress to make sure that's done the right way. But this is, again, a tremendous opportunity to help fill that void. And the last point that I would make is, let's use this historic agreement between Lebanon and Israel as an example and a precedent moving forward. There are still many different issues that need to be dealt with. The land border with Israel obviously has not been resolved. Issues related to refugees in Lebanon, issues related to the IMF requirements, and also the CEDRA conference. There are lots of things that Lebanon still needs to work on. But today, obviously, this is a historic agreement. Let's use this as an example, as a precedent to move forward and show the world that Lebanon is back on track, that they can move forward in a positive way. And that's what I know today is all about, Ed. And so I look forward to continuing to work with ATFL and MEI and the folks in Lebanon to use this as a positive example for what Lebanon can do. So thank you for having me today.
The honor is ours, Congressman. Thank you for your leadership. Also, your colleagues who share the chairmanship of the U.S. Lebanon Friendship Caucus, Elias, Debbie Dingell, and Charlie Crist. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're now going to be joined by Amos Hochstein. Amos, welcome.
Let me say both Ambassador Gabriel and Paul,
thank you so much for hosting this. This is, I've enjoyed working with both of you and in the past, and it's great to be back with you and with the people who care so much and so deeply about the Middle East and stability and security and prosperity in the Middle East. So again, appreciate your efforts and help in putting this together. Look, I think that yes, I was successful here, but I want to be clear. There's been 11 years of efforts into this, many different mediators, and I'm one of the former mediators who failed. So I've maybe I had the advantage of failing first before I can succeed. So I think that what changed? I think a few things changed. One is the reality on the ground. The economic conditions in Lebanon clearly have changed dramatically. And, just a few months ago when I started this effort, I would usually talk in Lebanon about the fact that we had less than 6 hours of electricity per day for most Lebanese. And by the time we reached conclusion of the negotiations, I was telling people that we had less than 2 hours of electricity per day for most Lebanese. You cannot build a economy. You cannot turn around an economy. You can't offer hope for economic change on a national level or on a personal level if you can't flip the light switch, if you don't know if you can charge your computer, if you don't know if you can, so you can't run a hospital and you can't start a small business. So that's one change, that really the worsening and deteriorating economic conditions. I think Lebanese people have had enough and they just want hope for a change and to have something that will invigorate and restart foreign direct investment and international companies believing that they can do something in Lebanon again. So I think that all those are contributing factors. Second, I think that I decided to change the structure of the negotiations. And I think part of what I got wrong in the past and in other places, and what I've been trying to do, not only here, but other places, to look at, instead of focusing on how much each side gets, what's the percentages of each side getting, this kind of win-lose dynamic, where in both sides, the argument immediately goes to not what I want, but if the other side gets X, that means I lost. And that is destructive for the negotiations and does not allow you to actually get to any point of real negotiations and to a solution. So we changed that dynamic. And I said, all right, let's focus on what is the most important pieces for each side. And remarkably, they're not the same. What Israel wants and needs and what Lebanon wants and needs are actually not all that competitive with each other. They're different. So maybe we can focus on getting each side what they need. And if we can do that, perhaps we can reach an agreement. And lastly, combining all these things to say, look, both sides wanted an American proposal on the table. That often happens. The Americans should come in and put a proposal on. I didn't want to do that. We've had a number of those and they didn't work. So why do it again? So I decided instead to focus on narrowing the gaps. Let's work on that combination of what is it that you need, what is most important for Lebanon for success, and what are the political red lines and security red lines for either side, and then work within that framework to narrow the gaps between the two parties. And I think ultimately what the final most important element is, we had leadership in both countries that just made a decision they wanted to reach an agreement. And I think that is critically important in getting to a deal in any scenario. Sorry for the long answer, Paul.
No, thanks, Amos. The second part sort of my question is to look forward. I know you've been involved in the gas and electricity attempt, through Jordan and Egypt. And the second part of my original question is, the effort to extract gas in the Lebanese blocks and then get it to market and so on is a long drawn out process. Part of it is international, having to do with Eastern Mediterranean arrangements and so on. On those two issues, How do you see the Egyptian, Jordanian, that deal? And do you see a continuing U.S. role in helping and encouraging Lebanon get to where we are now, which is an agreement to actually getting gas to the Lebanese electricity sector, getting it to market globally? That's still a long road ahead.
So I want to shorten that road. So first, it's going to take a few years to get gas out of that field. You have to identify how much gas there is in that field, where exactly it is, and then do the whole development plan. That takes years. If you want to be instructive, look at some of the fields that have been discovered recently in other countries, such as in Israel itself, or in some parts of sub-Saharan Africa and Central America. But I think that we can get to a point where while we're doing that, if we can get as much gas into Lebanon from Egypt and electricity from Jordan in the meantime, and start lifting economic conditions, I think that would be very important. So where are we? I think Lebanon needs to pass a couple of reforms that are relatively minor, to be honest, where all the work has already been done. It just needs to be announced on the tariff and on the new electricity and regulator. Once those are done, the United States has always been committed to getting that deal through. So we would like to see that happen. And I've always committed that we're going to work with the World Bank and Treasury Department to make sure that it first doesn't affect any sanctions, which I think we're okay on, but we'll have to have a determination formally. And then in conjunction with that, we'll work with the World Bank to approve the financing. Because at the end of the day, they have to finance this. And with the tariff structure the way it is now, that can't happen. So I think we can get that, and following that, perhaps work with connecting the Jordanian electricity system to the Lebanese electricity system. Doing that, we can probably go from 2 hours a day to almost 8 hours a day. Still not, a few years ago, I would shudder to think that Lebanon would only have 8 hours. Today, I'm very hopeful that we can get to 8 hours. So let's do this one piece at a time. I think that we can get there. And lastly, we have to make sure that all of this is done while maintaining transparency, good governance, and ensuring that the gas gets into the government-owned power plants, while also ensuring that the money goes into the coffers of the state and supports the economy, and making sure that that money is ring-fenced and safeguarded so that it benefits all people in Lebanon.
Thank you, Amos. Ed, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Amos. I must say that you've helped create a very positive image for the United States through your own personality, your ability to reach out to the public, etc. Let me just ask you, what's the real story here? Former Assistant Secretary Shanker said, "What a terrible deal for Israel." Then there's pundits in Lebanon that are saying anybody taking ownership above from line 29 is a bad deal for Lebanon. Explain to us what the truth of these matters are. Why is it in Lebanon's interest, and why did Israel see it in their interest?
I'm shocked to hear that there's politics involved here. So look, I won't comment directly on my predecessors. The only thing I'll say is that some people in the United States, as well as people in Israel, have said there was a better deal on the table for Israel. And some people in Lebanon, talking about line 29, will say there was a better deal for Lebanon here on the table. So let's make some things very clear. There was no deal. Nobody ever agreed to anything other than this. There were proposals that were perhaps better for Israel's original claims, and there were proposals that were better for some of Lebanon's most, extreme claims. So, but those are proposals. Those are not agreements. This is the only deal that reached an agreement. So, if the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, former U.S. Assistant Secretary, I think the tweak in their argument, in their writings, should probably be, we had ideas, not deals. There was no agreement. This is the only one. This is good for Israel's security because it does not get everything it wanted. That is true. But it does maintain the security that Israel needs on its boundary and on its border. And that is important. It also secures the Israeli waters, which is important. I'm talking about significantly south. A future potential conflict does no good for Israel's commercial activity in the Eastern Mediterranean. By the way, doesn't do any good for the Egyptian or the Cypriot either. Once missiles starts flying, every international company is going to withdraw their people from rigs in Egypt, Zur, or the Eastern Mediterranean is not that big. So this is really about security and stability for the entirety of the Eastern Mediterranean. Second, why is it good for Lebanon? Lebanon's original claim line was 23, never 29. 29 was added in October of 2020, over a decade after their original claim line. Lebanon, most importantly, will be able to use this to start investing in its economy, start supporting a turnaround of the country. So do the countries get everything they want? No, but they get 95% of what they wanted. That's the point. This is not a 50-50 or 60-40 compromise. This is actually getting 95 to 98% of what you want, and you move from there. And the hardest lesson in business that I've learned is sometimes in a meeting is to know when to take yes for an answer. And I think this is the yes for an answer.
Again, good job. It was what most people are saying is a win-win. So let me ask you, will Lebanon be able to explore and develop all of Kana Field for its own benefit and no others?
Yes. The deal, the way it works is that the gas that's in the Kana Field will be extracted for Lebanon, all of it. There is an arrangement so that if we don't know how much gas is where, so if there's gas that still is in the field that is south, there's going to be an arrangement between Total and Israel to remunerate it, not profit sharing. There's no profit sharing here. It is really just about remunerating Israel for the part that is south of the line 23 or south of what is now going to be their official legal binding maritime boundary line. This is about making sure that all the parties get what they need, but all the gas in that field will go towards Lebanon.
Thank you. Paul, please.
Amos, I wonder if you could put sort of this deal from the U.S. perspective into sort of the U.S. broader energy perspective, energy policy. Obviously, maybe a year ago, energy markets, gas markets were very different than they are today. Obviously, Western Europe is going through a wrenching rearrangement transition in which maybe offshore gas becomes much more valuable. It wasn't lost that U.S.-Saudi relations in the last week after the OPEC Plus decision were a bit shaken on sort of managing energy markets. To what degree is this? So how do you put it in context of what you worry about, which is broader energy security and broader energy policy? And is this deal certainly the clarity on the Israeli side, and their gas fields are already plugged in with Egypt and others to international markets? Do you see Lebanese offshore gas? Certainly it's good for Lebanon, if it's properly managed. Do you see Lebanese offshore gas being significant in the future energy mix for Western Europe? Is that something the U.S. sort of is interested in, focused on? How does it fit into your broader perspective?
So I think that let me put it into two contexts. One is broader context. One is the global energy piece that you just mentioned, Paul. The second is the broader U.S. interest in the Middle East. And I think that let me start with the Middle East. President Biden has from the beginning wanted to focus on stability, security, and prosperity. That is what we've been trying to do. And instead of constantly getting into a conversation about what happened during the Obama administration, during the Trump administration, during the Bush administration, we're trying to, let's not constantly have the disease of always judging every action by the lens of history and grudges and so on and misunderstandings. Let's look at the last, almost 2 years now, and culminating, I think, in the Jeddah summit when President went out to Saudi Arabia, met with the GCC +3, literally with the entire on that trip started in Israel and with the Palestinians, and met with the entirety of the Middle East leadership outside of of Lebanon and Syria, actually. This deal is exactly along the lines of what we're trying to do. And that is, let's lower the tensions. Not everything has to be about big, flashy peace agreements and so on. When you can get those, great. They're important, and we fully support them. But we have to also look at prevention of conflict to insert stability, which gives confidence and stability that builds upon that. Then we can actually ensure that we all know a conflict in one country in the Middle East rarely stays there. So removing the specter and the lowering the potential for conflict between Israel and Lebanon, and within Lebanon itself, if there was a continued economic collapse, so that doesn't reignite and spread again into Syria and beyond, is an achievement in of itself, I think, even if you take away some of the others. So it goes into that broader aspect of what we were trying to do. If you look at the Jeddah summit, part of what we announced there was the GCCIA, right? The electricity interconnection between Iraq and the GCC, reducing the influence of Iran and the leverage that it has over the provider of electricity for Iraq, and tying Iraq into the global broader set of its neighbors, so gives its options, and it can buy and sell electricity, ensuring there is more power in Iraq. So this really fits into this idea of trying to lower temperature and having more prosperity and more security. And I think security, stability, and prosperity are mutually enhancing. More stability and security creates more prosperity, and obviously more prosperity creates a more of a lose-lose equation for conflict. And therefore, you think twice before going to conflict if it's going to hurt you, not just your neighbor. So I think those are important. Within the broader energy, look, Israel's success and Egypt's success, and hopefully Cyprus' soon success, means that there's a more integrated region that is now contributing into a global energy crisis. Just think if we were able to reach this deal in 2016 when we tried, 2015, 16, Lebanon today would be a producer and selling into a global energy crisis, making significant amount more revenues, having 24-hour electricity, and being part of the solution for the international markets, international geopolitics. But I don't look backwards. I just look at backwards only to look forward. I don't want to have this conversation in 2025. So I want 2025 to be 2026 and onwards to be where Lebanon is that. It's integrated into the Egypt and Turkey, and through that into the global markets. Step one, Lebanon will supply itself. Step one has to be gas going into power plants in Lebanon. And we have not said the final word yet on investment in Lebanon energy. I believe this deal, and this is an educated guess, so I think I have some things in store to show that we can bring new investment from the outside, foreign investment, into power plants and upgrading energy systems now that we've reached this deal. Once this deal is moving, I think you're going to see some additional investments into that, and I'm committed to try to help do that. The next phase will be, as you discover more and more gas, is to be able to actually get revenues not just by increasing your own supply, but also by selling it onto the global market. And that's something that we need to discuss. But we got to take one step at a time, learn to walk before we run, and all the other idioms that one can use in this kind of a scenario.
Amos, maybe it's good they didn't discover gas a few years back. The hope is that moving forward, the mechanisms will be put in place to ensure that there is no corruption. And we'll ask Speaker Saab, what they have in mind in terms of protecting the people's resource in that sense. But let me just ask you, does this deal open up the door for maybe more cooperation between the two countries? Let me give you one example, maybe the land border. Do you think there could be such an opening, maybe on the land border? And would you be willing to spend some time and energy to help make that happen?
Wow, thanks, Ed.
You're welcome.
Look, I want to be very cautious We have not solved here. I took this on to solve the maritime boundary as a step one. I think there are still significant challenges between Israel and Lebanon, the presence of Hezbollah. These are sensitive political times, both in Lebanon with the presidency up for grabs, requiring a successor in just a few weeks. Sensitive political time on the Israeli side with elections coming November 1. I think this is the 5th election in as many years. So I think let's take one step at a time. I hope that we can solidify some of that. I don't know about cooperation, direct cooperation. Lebanon doesn't even recognize the state of Israel as a state formally. So I think when we get to talk about the land boundary, I think that this does show a model of where there can be agreement if we try not to do too much. Let's do things piecemeal. We did the maritime boundary. We didn't try to solve Lebanon-Israel relations. We tried to solve the Rubik's Cube that we had. Now, I think it would be prudent to go and have a conversation and see where we are on the land boundary. A lot more progress has actually been made quietly. The tough issues are now the ones that are remaining. I always, as far as what I would do, Ed, you've been in this job before. We serve at the pleasure of the president. When the president asked me to do this, I wasn't sure I wanted to do this one. But Joe Biden is one of the hardest people I've ever experienced saying no to. And he is quite ambitious. And if he asks, I'll always do what he says. But I'll let him make the call on what the next, what's in. There's a lot of challenges on my plate at the moment, as Paul alluded to a few of them. We do have energy. Once used to be a backwater of the foreign policy and national security arena. I think today it has risen to the number one, if number two, if not number one issue on our global national security agenda, with what we're seeing from Asia to Russia to Ukraine to the Middle East. And it connects the dots of our domestic, all of our domestic, our Lebanese domestic, US domestic, German domestic, India domestic. It's the number one cost for consumers. It's the number one cost on budgets. And therefore it becomes the most important piece. And we're doing this during a critically important energy transition that we need to accelerate. So these are all things that are happening all at the same time. So there's more work to be done, that's for sure.
So now that we know who you take your orders from, Paul and I should very soon get over to the White House and make our requests there, see if we can influence whether or not Amos can get back to Lebanon. Let me ask you one more question, maybe our final question before we welcome Elias onto our presentation. You know, there are many provisions in the agreement that include the phrase "in good faith." Well, whose good faith is that? And it depends a lot on Israel. And with elections coming on, that's a little scary. In good faith. And also kind of a related question, how will you be able to, is there mechanisms for dispute resolution as part of that?
So great question. First, I think that it does say in good faith, but first of all, good faith means everybody, means the United States, means Lebanon, means Israel. But I will add that this is one of those, there's trust but verify, there's faith, but there's also law and binding language. The faith here is real. The good faith is really is always required, in my opinion, if you want to have proper implementation. There are many agreements in the Middle East that ended up not being worth anything. Here, what we try to do is put binding language, legally binding language, and there is across the board. The good faith is about not trying to use whatever tools you have to mess with the other side. And both sides are perfectly able to do that and perfectly able to avoid doing that. And the United States will try to encourage both sides on a regular basis not to do that. I think it's an expression for the two sides to say they're serious about implementation. They're serious about wanting to make this work, because neither side can succeed in getting what they want unless the other side gets what they want too. So that's important. as far as the United States' role as a moving forward dispute settlement mechanism, I would not want to call it that, but we have committed, which we normally don't like to do, to continue to with this process where we're not giving guarantees, but we're giving assurances that if the parties get to the point where something is going wrong or something needs to be discussed, or not even going wrong, just realities on the ground don't always match your expectations. Things can change that we did not anticipate. So I have assured both sides the United States will continue to play that role as needed, as and when needed, in order to shepherd this process along. I do believe that we've put a lot here to enable this to move smoothly without a lot of direct U.S. intervention. But it will be there if necessary at any point it needs. And I know that President Macron has told President Biden, has told myself, and has communicated to both parties that they would be happy to be helpful when necessary as well.
So thank you very much. Before I turn this over to Paul for final comments, are you going to make it to Nakor next week, the 27th, for the signing? And can you just let our audience know who the signatories are? What's that process? And then over to you, Paul.
Well, we haven't selected a date yet for the signing, so I don't know. We are working on the details and the choreography of when, where, who, what, how. It will be the president of Lebanon, the prime minister of Israel, will have to decide on the signing. We're figuring that out, and I'm sure stay tuned in the next few days, 2-3 days, and we'll let everybody know what to expect. But I do expect to be traveling to the region next week.
Well, thank you for all that you're doing on behalf of our country. We're very proud of the work that you're doing and the success that President Biden has had in that regard. Thank you again. Paul?
No, yes, again, thank you, Amos, for all your work. Thank you, and congratulations for this success. A really historic event. I'm eager to welcome the Deputy Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament, His Excellency Elias before we go into the second session of this panel. So, Deputy Speaker, great to have you with us. Before Mr. Hochstein leaves, if you want to have a couple of words, and then we'll.
Paul, can I, before you turn it to Elias, I just want to note something that is really important. When you asked me before about the ingredients, and I said one of the things I said was that it was important to have two governments who actually wanted to reach a deal. I want people, you have a number of people on this webinar. It takes enormous amount of work to do this, and people are thanking me. But at the end of the day, there were some really late nights, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Middle East time, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. U.S. time, that we were all on phones. And the Israeli team was 3-4 people that dedicated enormous amount of time. But I got to tell you, Elias Saab, His Excellency, the Deputy Speaker, Elias Saab, did not represent the president in our conversation. He represented all of Lebanon. And really was a tremendous asset for Lebanon and for the government. One of the hardest things that used to be the case was to reach consensus. Shuttle diplomacy was not between Israel and Lebanon. Shuttle diplomacy was inside Lebanon. Literally shuttling with the American crazy motorcades that we have, driving everybody in Lebanon on the streets crazy, going from Babda to the Prime Minister's office, to the Speaker's office, to the Chad's office. But having the last 5 days of this negotiation were very intense and really fruitful. And this could not have happened without Elias, who's become a friend through this process. So I'm grateful. The United States, I think, is grateful to both the Israeli and to teams, as well as to the Lebanese team headed by Elias on this. And, there were several others. I don't want to mention everybody because then I'll omit someone. But I just want to extend my thanks again to Elias, who I hope is caught up on sleep, because I don't think he slept more than 2 hours a night for the last 5 days of these negotiations. So with that, thank you, Ed, and thank you, Paul.
Amos, don't get off yet, because I think Elias wants to say hello as well.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Ed. Before I move to my part, also I want to congratulate you for hosting this important webinar, because at some point we will all get to speak about the details of that. But let me say, Amos Hochstein has been a tremendous, honest broker and a fair broker, as we categorized it. And I think his style, his new approach is what made the difference. He started to say in the beginning that he started and he had failed before, and maybe others who failed in the process are maybe now attacking that part of a deal. But if it wasn't because of his style and his new approach, his dynamic approach, the approach that he categorized it to me from the beginning, that we must have a win-win situation. We cannot have a win-lose situation. In addition to, yes, let's figure out which is what's needed by each country. I think that approach that opened the possibility of reaching where we've reached. And also, I must say that I was dealing with someone that is, smart. I don't know if I should be giving all these compliments to Amos Hochstein. Very diplomatic, and when you deal with a diplomatic person, a very direct approach, you feel that yes, we've had arguments at times, and he recalls we've called the deals off at some other times. So we've had those long nights, and then at some point he will say, "Come on, Elias, hang on there. We can get back to work again." And I do the same thing. So it wasn't easy. It was a tough one. At some point, maybe more things would come, but I want to say thank you, Amos, for the effort and for being patient. And as everyone said in the beginning, you have helped to make a deal happen. We've had many ideas in the past. For 12 years, we were not able to turn them into a deal. This time, Amos and his style, and as been requested by President Biden, they have really put a lot of effort, despite what's going on in the world and all the trouble that's going on in the world. He was able to give attention to this deal. And yes, from New York to Washington to Beirut to all the travels, we in the end have reached something that is categorized as a historic event. Thank you, Amos.
Thank you. Thanks, Amos.
Thank you, Amos. Deputy Speaker, thank you for being with us. It's wonderful to have you join this webinar. Again, congratulations to you for this agreement. Congratulations to Lebanon, the country you represent. It really indeed is a historic agreement. Let me open with sort of a two-part question. One mentioned by Amos already, which is, there's been negotiations on this for almost 10 years. I know you've not been in government for 10 years, but from what you understand, why weren't we able to make this deal 10 years ago, in which case we would have been pumping gas, we would have 24-hour electricity, we'd be exporting gas to Europe. Why did it take us that long? And how did this particular agreement finally come to pass on the Lebanese side? Was it because the economy collapsed, the politicians and the parties and Hezbollah maybe and others felt, there was no other option? So my first part of the question is, why did it take so long and how did this succeed? And we're very happy that it did. And the second part is, and we can get into it, but what are the next steps ahead, the next 5 years? It's one thing to have an agreement, obviously, another to succeed in all the steps that still need to happen. And what can you tell the Lebanese public, which maybe has not very high levels of trust at this point, given all that's happened? So take us through some of those, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. As you mentioned, it's a collection of all these things that delayed the deal. Probably, Amos touched on something that probably before neither side was ready to move forward with such a deal. Don't forget that 10 years ago, we were probably coming out of a brutal war that took place on that particular border. And Lebanon has suffered, and the people of Lebanon have suffered multi-wars, and we paid a lot of price for what was happening. So it wasn't easy, and nobody in Lebanon was even thinking or discussing that we could be reaching a point where we would be signing something that is economically right for the country, but at the same time, it will mean stability on that border. So I believe the circumstances have changed. Yes, I have not been part of it in the past. Many tried. Amos himself, as he mentioned, he tried and he failed in the beginning. Then he came back with this new approach, the way that he did put it. I'm lucky to say I learned from their mistakes, so I can't categorize myself that I failed because it was my first attempt at it. But I know that we've given it every effort that we had to give it. We, as Amos said, days and nights. And at some point when I say I'm too tired to go to sleep at 4 a.m., I say the phone is on in case you need to continue on something, ring back, and they did. So yes, it was not easy because there was a determination that we need to see if we can get the deal, because both sides, the Lebanese and the American sides, and maybe on the Israeli side, but we were not in direct touch or in direct contact with them, have realized that this is the opportunity. If this deal did not take place now, I don't think if it would, when will that happen again in the future? And the alternative to that deal, I can tell you, it would have been escalation and possibly a war. Everyone was seeing the situation in the region. Also, everyone was realizing the need for a stable region. The Europeans want it. The Americans for sure want that stability. We knew that this is a requirement. It gave us strength in our negotiation to be able to say, this is our rights. We want our full rights. We want a deal. We don't want to go into escalation or war, but we want our full rights. We've waited 10, 11 years not to give up any of our rights, and that's what happened. So the win-win approach allowed us to get where we are today. I don't know if I answered the second part. If not, can you just tell me what it is?
Yeah, the second part is really, let's look forward. Lebanese, I think most of them are very happy about this deal. The challenge is the next year, 2, 3, 4. How do we get from the right to drill and all of that to the reality of actually extracting gas, getting it into the Lebanese electricity grid, connecting with maybe the Eastern Mediterranean, gas arrangements to get the gas to markets, particularly in Europe. I know that will take time. And at a time when the Lebanese public is going through the worst economic crisis in recent times, very low trust in the government. They've seen their savings lost in the banking system. What do you see as credible steps that you can reassure the Lebanese public that this deal will actually lead to real results? What guarantees? Where will the money be going? How much progress have we made in setting up a sovereign wealth fund so that the money isn't again lost in in corruption and sort of the usual deals that happen? What can you say about the future?
Two parts to answer this question. The first part is part of what we've negotiated is actually how do we make sure that something will start. The work by the developer, and in our case now it's Total and MEI, and any partner that may join them, that they will start the work. They'll start showing the Lebanese people that we are up, we're there, and we are beginning. What happened in that is we held the deal for some time because the deal did not only negotiate the demarcation of the line, but we also negotiated exactly that same topic. When would we be allowed to start, or the companies that we have contracted, they can start? Anything that may obstruct that, we needed to make sure it's resolved, including, because I know in Lebanon, many people are asking that this is all depending on a financial arrangement that was referred to earlier in this, in this discussion, that the financial arrangement had to be finalized between Israel and Total, which is true. And Amos answered that. But what I need to clarify and be very clear about it is the remuneration that Israel will be getting from Total, they will be getting it from Total's share, not from the Lebanese share. Lebanon will be getting its full share, and the gas will all be for Lebanon from both sides of the demarked line, basically south and north of the line that we have agreed on. So the entire Ghana field will be developed, and the shares of Lebanon will be given to Lebanon completely and its entirety. So basically, yes, there was this deal that they thought, what if Total does not agree to remunerate Israel for or compensate them for giving up that entire field to Lebanon? We did not move forward until we were assured that this agreement has been reached. Now, at least there is an understanding, an agreement. President Biden confirmed it to President Aoun on the phone and said, I'm there to make sure that we will monitor this agreement and we will make sure that this will be implemented. President Macron called and said and offered the same assurances as well. And we have met with Total. Even Total officials have met with President Aoun today, earlier in the day, to assure the Lebanese people that after the signature of this agreement, or those letters that are being prepared, because I don't know if we can call it an agreement, there's an arrangement that's been made, a very smart agreement, an arrangement with the United States. So Lebanon will receive that confirmation of the terms that we've agreed on from the United States, and we will confirm to the United States of our acceptance. And then they do that independently with the Israelis, and the Israelis will write back to them. So any breach of this agreement, if Israel or the new government that comes in Israel want to breach such agreement, they are breaching an agreement that they have with the United States. So that is one point that everyone must be aware of. So for that, I can tell you, we have all the guarantees that the work would start. Total is ready to begin, and any other block within Lebanon is free for Lebanon. It's open for all international companies, and I hope Lebanon will be opening up more tenders, and we will have more international companies to come and start working. It gives Lebanon and the Lebanese hope. This is a game changer for us. This is going to take Lebanon in a different direction. But what is important, as you mentioned in your second part of the question, how can we make sure that all the funds will go in a sovereign fund that is far from corruption, sovereign fund that will have a lot of transparency, and we will have it monitored? I can tell you, Lebanon has learned its lesson. All the people that are there, they're not going to allow something like that to happen anymore and stay quiet, especially us, the new people that, I'm relatively new into the political scene in Lebanon. Many like me are also. We discuss that on a regular basis. We want to make sure there's an understanding that we want to have a sovereign fund, and what the Lebanese parliament should be concentrating on right now is how to make sure that this sovereign fund is supported by all the laws that are necessary. And another support would be from the international community, the IMF, recommendations for new laws that are reforms laws, and they will be monitoring. Everyone is going to be monitoring what will happen with the funds that are coming. It will not be wasted. They will be deposited in a place for the Lebanese, for the future of the Lebanese, and this is to be monitored. We will not start seeing money coming in before 4 years, maybe, into that fund. So we have ample time to make sure that by then we will have what it takes to make sure this is safe and far from allowing anyone to do any corrupted deal with that money. So I'll leave it at that and wait for the other question.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's nice to hear, reassuring. Thank you. Ed, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Elias, it's great to see you virtually today. And congratulations, Mr. Deputy Parliament Speaker. It was mentioned to me by a US official recently that this deal may not have happened had you not been in charge of the Lebanese side of this. And the point being that you understood how America thinks, and you were able to use that thinking in a way that would benefit Lebanon. So congratulations to you. I have a couple of tough questions for you. One is an
easy one.
No, you don't get easy from Paul and I. The first one is, what's your evaluation of Hezbollah's role in making this agreement possible? Do you agree that Hezbollah's threat of military forces was useful in this process? Why did Hezbollah step aside? I mean, a lot of people are asking that question, and they let the deal go through. So give us the frank answer to that question, please.
Before I answer what you consider to be a tough question, for me, it's a normal question and I can easily answer it without any problem. Let me say back to the initial introduction that you mentioned. First, let me allow me to thank you, Ambassador Gabriel, for inviting me here today. And I want everyone to know that you and I go a long way back. And we go a long way back to probably at the time when we met, I don't know how many years ago now, when with President Clinton. And that, yes, allowed me to understand the American mentality and the American thinking. And yes, that helped me how to be negotiating. And as I mentioned when Amos Hochstein was there, they were tough negotiations. We've reached points on more than one occasion, and now we're saying it publicly, where we would say, that's it. We're announcing that the negotiations are over. The deal is off. We're gonna tell the press. He will tell me, I'm telling my president that the deal is gonna be over. And I answer, I already told my president the deal is not going well and it's over. So it was that kind of conversation that we were having, but at the same time, with all respect. And because I understand the mentality, it did help a lot to get where we ended up with. So yes, you understand that we go a long way back, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Lebanon next week. You happen to be at the same time in Lebanon when Amos Hochstein is going to be in Lebanon. So hopefully next week will be a busy day for us. Now, to answer your question, whether Hezbollah had any role or their threats had any role to facilitating or speeding the negotiations, I tell you flat out, yes, it did. And I am honest, and I have to be honest. And because I am honest, I was able to reach, where we reached with this negotiation. When the Israelis or the Americans or anyone want to talk to us about, we need to, that will give stability to the region, that will give stability to the border. They're not talking about, a charity that I have back home that may be threatening the stability in case Lebanon does not get its full rights from its energy and from the gas and the oil in the sea. They were talking about the presence of Hezbollah. So because that was taken into consideration, I think that did help to speed up the deal to reach where we've reached. But at the same time, the Israelis also have force. And the absence of that would have meant a war. And nobody wanted a war. And what this deal did is to save the country from another war and to make sure that both sides now are looking forward to have a stable border. So we moved from an escalation and we were so close, and Amos mentioned it. He said, can you imagine rockets flying? It wasn't only Israel that would have been affected. Cyprus would have been affected. Egypt would have been affected. The entire Mediterranean would have been affected. Who was he talking about? Whose rockets was he talking about? So that's why I have to be honest with you and tell you, yes, it did have an impact on what we did. But at the same time, that was taken by us as an opportunity to tell everyone that what we need is not a war. What we need is a stable region, because Lebanon wants prosperity. We want our economy to take a different approach. And it was at a time when everyone needed that. Europeans wanted this. The Israelis wanted this. The American had, a role to play after the war that took place between Russia and Ukraine. So there was a window of opportunity and we grabbed it. And that's what happened.
But why did they step aside?
Well, let me tell you why. It wasn't that they stepped aside. From the beginning, as you know, Lebanon first doesn't recognize the state of Israel. And Amos mentioned this. They don't even consider that Israel existed, or they want to negotiate with a country that they don't believe should be in existence. So it's Lebanon. We feel that, the Israelis occupied the Palestinian lands. And so from an ideology point of view, they don't want to be involved in that. And that's different. The Lebanese government wanted to make sure that we demark our borders. And they said from the beginning, whatever the government decides, we are going to be behind the government on its decision. When they would have gotten involved, if we moved north of our border that we've declared at the United Nations, or the decree that we deposited to the line in the south of Lebanon. And if we didn't move north of that line, they would have not been involved, and they assured us that we are not concerned with this negotiation. If the government is doing its job and they're protecting the borders of Lebanon, then we are behind the country, behind the government. At the same time, they did see the situation, the economical situation in Lebanon, the financial situation of Lebanon. They know that we must, part of winning anything, a war, is basically to get results back for your country. It's not enough to go and create a war and win and then lose everything, including your financial and economical strength of the country. They've realized, like everyone else in Lebanon, that it's a time when we need to have to make use of our energy, our wealth that is in the sea, and they allowed the government to do its job, and they stood behind the government for that. And the president of the country, President Michel Aoun, who asked me to lead this negotiation, especially towards the end, because there are many of my colleagues in Lebanon that were part of the the negotiations for years. I wouldn't say it was just me, but in the end, the last part, when it got too intense, yes, it was between me and Amos Hochstein for a month, and then the last week in particular, President Aoun was giving us the assurances that all sides in Lebanon would stand behind the country. Go get the deal according to our framework that we did put in place. The Speaker Berry played a major role in that. He worked on that deal before. He created the framework agreement before, and the Prime Minister Mikati also was supportive. And so I was, coordinating with everyone at the same time. And part of what made us get what we got from that deal is exactly the fact that, for the first time we see unity in Lebanon. What allowed us to reach where we reached is that unity. It gave us also strength, and we are where we are today because of that. The Prime Minister, the Speaker, and the President.
So before I turn over to Paul for closing comments, let me just speak to the issue of unity. Several people have said this is probably the first show of unity in a long time by the leadership of Lebanon. And I made a comment earlier that maybe it was good that oil wasn't discovered 5-6 years ago. You almost admitted that maybe Lebanon wasn't ready, given its the corruption that was throughout the country. It would have been a terrible shame to have oil go the same way the funds have left the bank. So it's almost a good time, maybe not to have had it before now. But as Paul said, you need to reinforce this audience today, reassure them on how are you going to prevent any corrupt practices in the oil sector, but also how are you going to come together on an IMF reform package? You're the deputy parliament speaker, you're in charge, and there's so much you can get done, and there's so much to do in the next few months. How are you going to do that? Tell this audience that you're going to get the IMF deal done and how, and you're going to make sure there's no corruption when it comes to oil and gas. Thank you so much. Our respect for what you've done is very high.
Thank you. First, the Speaker of the House is the person in charge. I am his deputy. But I do have a role to play to assist him and prepare the laws that we need to pass to put it on the General Assembly, where he can chair and make sure that those deals are those laws are passed. Now, yes, there had been a lot of work. We have not done a lot of work that we should have done in terms of reforms. The laws that we are passing, maybe they're 90% of what we would aim for, but they're not 100%. We need to make sure we fix it. We want to make sure that all these laws would be 100% as we want them, as transparent as every country in the world would see it. We want to make sure that we will correct the laws that were passed and had a glitch in them. We need to make sure that the people would look at us and say, yes, you've done what was supposed to be done. There's no, black hole in that law, or there's no way that some people can use it to get away with something. We need to work on that. And as I chair the joint committees in the parliament, some of those laws pass through the joint committees, and we are working closely with the IMF. We are working closely with the American administration and with the Europeans. And I'll tell you, we've been promised after that we will get the support that we need. And we were promised that everyone would be standing by Lebanon in the IMF project and in finalizing the reforms that we need to work on. And also, we've been promised that there will be a lot of supervision, or there will be someone witnessing, if you wish, what do we do next? And we have 4 years to get it done. The sovereignty fund that Paul spoke about is a crucial. We must pass, and we must pass it without any doubt that this would not be a target for any corruption in the future. And that would be our goal. And I mentioned during your last visit to Lebanon that that's something that I personally am very interested in working in that direction. There will be visits to the European Union, and there will be another visit to the US Congress. We want to make sure that we can bring in programs into our parliament, advanced programs that will enforce our transparency and will give us the research units that we need in order to pass such laws in a transparent way. So we are going to be working on that. It's a promise that we have made to the people, and we will continue doing so.
Thank you again, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Maybe a final question, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Amos Hochstein also has been working on the gas and electricity deal with Jordan and Egypt for a long time. He mentioned in the session, I think you were listening to, that Lebanon needs to do a couple of reforms that he said are not difficult in order to release this support. As you say, the offshore gas issue, in the best of cases, it's 4 or 5 years down the road, whereas the Jordanian and Egyptian deal has been on the table for a few months and would give immediate relief to the Lebanese who are down to 0 or 1 or 2 hours of electricity a day. Where are we on passing what Lebanon needs to pass so we can at least get that support?
Paul, I will have to be honest with you as well on this one. And when my friend Amos Hochstein comes to Lebanon next week, we're going to have this conversation. I believe there is more than that. I believe that it's not just like we only had to pass these 2 points that he mentioned, which is the tariff and the electricity regulating body that we need to put in place, or at least kick off the establishment of it. I believe that there's something new that now came into the equation, and that is the need for gas in the world after what happened in Europe. So, and that preoccupied everyone from concentrating on getting Egypt's gas into Lebanon. We've been promised that this effort is going to go back. And yes, despite the fact that we have an agreement with the Egyptians on the price of the gas, the prices have gone up more than what we've agreed on. We just want to make sure that that would not be an obstacle. That would not be an excuse that as in why the gas is not going to come to Lebanon. We've been told that the United States will facilitate that with the World Bank, and we would talk about that during the next visit, and we would want to make sure that this happens. The Lebanese people needs electricity yesterday before tomorrow. We cannot continue doing anything, and if there is no electricity, we won't have schools, we won't have hospitals, we won't have anything functioning or operating. And I'm afraid even the airport could be shut down soon. It is a catastrophe. And part of what we've agreed on is to make sure that we start facilitating things that Lebanon can start standing on its feet again in all these aspects. More international investments would come into the country. President Biden spoke about that loudly when he was talking to the president. We want to give hope. We want to do what is necessary in Lebanon, but also the international community and the United States in particular have assured us that they will facilitate anything that is necessary in that regard. And we want to start with the electricity project. We want to make sure that the Jordanians, who are ready, by the way, to start sending electricity, and the Egyptian gas. And we have to thank both countries, Egypt and Jordan, for signing with us what they have signed. We just need the World Bank to move faster and the World Bank is going to be challenged by us to move faster. After all what happened and after the deal that we have reached, there is no issue about stability on the border now, but they need to deliver also their part to the Lebanese people.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Speaker. We hope to hear good news about that. As you say, you're going to see Mr. Hochstein hopefully next week. Again, congratulations, I would say, to you and to Lebanon. This is a historic agreement. We and many others around the world and in Lebanon will be continuing to follow the very necessary steps so that we can build a positive, future, avoid the problems of the past. But thank you for all your efforts. It's very, very historic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Allow me also, I forgot to thank, Congressman Darren Lahoud and his colleagues for the support with the ATFL and with Ed's work, because they have worked with us before the announcement of that signature. Ed and I have been exchanging, phone calls and messages. We told him when we needed his support, and he was there for us. And the ATFL has been there for us. So thank you all. Thank you, Paul, also for the encouragement and the statements that you have put out as well. And for everyone that helped you. I can't mention them all, but really all this has helped. This was a teamwork and a teamwork for Lebanon, for the best interest of Lebanon. And we have delivered what we believe to be the best for our country.
Thank you both.
Thank you and good luck.
And see you soon. See you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Ed. Bye-bye.